Sarah lives in Caerphilly with her 2 children and partner. Being deaf since the age of 3, Sarah shares her thoughts about education, her interest in golf, and life as a deaf person living in Wales. Her story at 40.
I wasn't born deaf, but I became deaf at the age of 3.5. Up until then, I had acquired spoken language and had access to spoken language, which I consider a real advantage compared to those who were born deaf. So those 3.5 years really made a big difference. Interestingly though, my grandparents' brother lived in Swansea and their neighbour was deaf and their family was deaf. So every 3 weeks I'd go along and visit them and they really welcomed me in. And this was a fantastic opportunity because I really had exposure to sign language when I was deaf, because at home my family aren't deaf. They would gesticulate, but I was never really privy to full conversations that they were having at home. And when I think about school attitudes, I remember being in school and teachers saying to me, no, don't sign here, Sarah, because you're an intelligent girl, so you need to speak. And so they considered sign language a failure and that sign language was only for those deaf children who weren't intelligent. And so that was a real conflict for me and really confusing in terms of my identity. Around the age of 15, I remember feeling particularly frustrated because up until then, we played a lot, climbed trees. Basically, I was a bit of a tomboy. You know, I was into everything, running about. But when you get to 14 or 15, your social activities start to change. You start hanging out in the street and just talking. And so that was really difficult because I couldn't really have access to conversations that were spoken. I remember particularly in school holidays, my brother playing golf in the garden because my father and my brother are really keen golfers. And he asked me if I wanted to have a go. And I did, and I really enjoyed it. And when my father came home one particular day and he found out that I enjoyed it, he asked me if I wanted lessons. So I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And to be honest, I've never looked back since. I've represented at various levels Welsh deaf girls back then, and golf is still a really important part of my life. Golf is something that puts me on an equal footing to hearing society. And if you think about it, back then I was participating at only 14 or 15 years old.
Sarah's interest in golf as a teenager obviously demonstrated her skill and ability, although, like many deaf pupils in mainstream education, when Sarah reached high school, the barriers to learning she experienced did have an impact.
I recall one time in school in particular, we had a spelling test. Now I sat in the geography class and I understood the word spelling because we regularly had spelling checks in the deaf unit, but I didn't understand the written word test. And I was sat next to a really promising athlete, Lisa Griffiths. And this is quite a funny story actually. So we had to copy down 10 words from the board, 10 local place names. And so we all wrote them down. And of course, I didn't know why we were writing it down because I didn't understand the word test. So the following week, our geography teacher said, okay, everybody, it's time to do your spelling test. And I still didn't have a clue what test meant. And so out came the plain pieces of paper. And I'm thinking, I have no idea what I'm meant to be doing here. And he spoke some words. And I thought, I have no idea what he's saying. So I just copied what Lisa was writing down. Just thinking, it's the only way I can really cope with this. What's he saying, I thought? So I just wrote it down. Now, unfortunately, unbeknownst to me, Lisa was not a proficient speller. So everyone else was getting 8 or 9 out of 10. Lisa and I were getting 1 out of 10 and 2 out of 10. And I thought, why have I got a low mark? So when I got home and explained to my father what had happened, he said, this is what a spelling test means. And I thought, oh, now I understand. So then I got 8 out of 10 in future tests because I understood what was being asked of me. It was never explained to me what that particular word meant, but on the other hand, I didn't want to ask or clarify because I didn't want to come across as being stupid. One lesson learnt anyway was that I'm going to be more assertive. I decided to be more assertive and ask and not to be afraid to ask what things mean.
For Sarah, Technology has always played an important role in helping her to communicate and understand the world around her.
In 1979 was the invention of subtitles on television, and I remember one particular Christmas at my grandmother's house, because I would always pester my parents and say, what are they saying on the TV? What are they saying? And that was a bit hard work for my parents. And I think it was Boxing Day, if my memory serves me correctly. But I remember Gone with the Wind was on, and it's a really long film, isn't it? It's a good 3 or 4 hours or something like that. And 1979, December the 26th, I remember the date, that I saw subtitles on television for the first time. And the good thing was my parents could get on and do their things they wanted to do in the kitchen, and I was left watching television, not pestering them, because I could understand what was being said. Now then, as soon as the January sales came on, my dad shot out to the shops and bought a television that had subtitles. I think he was really pleased that I didn't have to hassle him anymore. So that's my first experience of technology. And if we look now at the advancement of technology, I've seen the invention of fax machines, the antiquated text phone. And looking back now, those machines are really outdated. However, it's really sad that industry today still thinks we should rely on these antiquated systems. And if we look at what options we've got available to us today, like Twitter, Facebook, Google+, using social media has really improved the lives of deaf people. But face-to-face meetings can still be quite difficult.
Despite the barriers Sarah experienced when she was growing up, she strived to achieve many great things.
I'm the first deaf person in Wales to gain the Duke of Edinburgh Gold Award, and also the first deaf person to establish their own deaf awareness training company, and have done since 2001. And I established this because of the discrimination I faced, and I thought I needed to do something about it. So I deliver deaf awareness training, and I'm also involved in business networks. So yeah, I do a little bit of everything really.
Now in 2012 and working as a successful businesswoman, Sarah produces a lifestyle magazine, SL First, that works to promote accessible businesses. She is also passionate about promoting the use of British Sign Language in society as a whole.
I gain knowledge from British Sign Language, not from using any residual hearing or lip reading. The fact is, I gain more from using British Sign Language, and I can evidence this if I compare myself from my 20s to now. There is no comparison. I would consider myself better than the average 40-year-old hearing person, because I'm now understanding things that I missed in my formative years. Yes, my parents gesticulated, but I'm understanding more when getting it in British Sign Language. But it's about society's attitudes, though, I feel. If we take the example of parents who have a deaf child, they will meet an array of professionals, from health visitors, paediatricians, educational psychologists, speech and language therapists, audiologists. All these medical professionals are trying to find a cure for deafness. And this could influence parents' decisions, and it promotes the oralist approach rather than sign language. Deaf children and parents are not meeting deaf adults. And society really does see sign language and deaf people in derogatory terms. I do think it's really vital that they're meeting deaf adults, and I feel the government should be promoting British Sign Language and putting it on the national curriculum. Because children and young people are learning Welsh and foreign languages, which is great, but why not British Sign Language? Because then we wouldn't need interpreters. We're only using British Sign Language interpreters because society can't sign. Granted, we don't use our voices, but society can't sign. And I really do think it's more important to look at things through a linguistic model rather than the social model that we use today, because that's about finding solutions through resources like sign language interpreters. But I think sign language should be used in education. It actually improves deaf young people's life chances. They can become professionals. If everybody signed, we wouldn't face the barriers we face today. The main thing I would like to say to deaf and hard of hearing people out there is be proud of your identity. There are those deaf British Sign Language users who are culturally deaf. They have a shared language and culture that they're very proud of. And they face discrimination. And we would compare ourselves to those foreign people who move to the UK and face barriers because everything is in their second language. And we've also got deaf people who are hard of hearing but are in denial about their hearing loss. And I would say, don't live in denial about it because you're only disabling yourself. Hearing Society will always expect you to fit in and for you to understand. And I would say, be proud of who you are.